Okay, everybody, welcome to this week's episode of the One Shot Movement podcast, where we dive deep into stories of entrepreneurs, business people, anyone that's out there making it happen. And I'm doing a special series at the moment where I'm trying to provide more context and education around important decisions and important topics in the world, and more so in Australia. And there's a really big one on the horizon with a referendum around, I guess, a concept called The Voice. Most people in Australia would have heard of that right now. And I've reached out to one of the biggest business leaders. He's also a political strategist and expert, Mr. Warren Mundine. He's been writing a lot lately on LinkedIn around this topic. And we really want to provide a different angle, a different view, a different perspective that we often don't see in the mainstream. So welcome to the show, Mr. Warren Mundine.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Good. No, I like to provide every guest an opportunity just to showcase a bit of your story. First of all, spend a couple of minutes, how you got into the position that you are at the moment. So if you can just take us down a little journey there.
Sure. I was born in Grafton, up on the north coast of New South Wales. I was, a very large family, Aboriginal family. My mother was a Gumbaynggirr Yuin Irish woman, and my father was a Bundjalung man. And when I come along, we come out of Bayugal, which is about 80 kilometres up the Clarence Valley. My parents, my grandparents, and that they lived in humpies, and if people would know what Aboriginal humpies are like, and that's how they grew up. They were very hard-working people. They believed in taking responsibility for your life. They believed in never, good and bad, whatever, and also, don't blame other people for your problems. You just get up and go and make your life what it is. So we grew up, there was 11 kids. I was number 9 of those 11 kids. We were, a poor family, but, my father ended up driving a grader for the Department of Main Roads, and then went off and worked for LJ Hooker when they were doing proper land development and housing and stuff like that. So he did quite well, eventually he did. So we grew up in that sort of working class family that my father used to wear. I don't know if people wear overalls anymore, but he wore those green overalls that you used to see, and he wore them day and night. He used to get up at 5 a.m. in the morning and just go to work and made sure that we were fed and clothed and had a roof over our head. And that was sort of my background. And then when I left school, I went in and did an apprenticeship. I worked in a factory in Silverwater in Sydney. And then I went from there, a fitter and turner. Then I went and worked for a pipeline construction work, and then worked my way up from that position. And so where I am today, so I'm the chairman of a copper mining company, and also on the board of a uranium mining company. And plus I got a major shareholder in a job trail, which is we do labour hire and work like that, and plus a number of other businesses I do as well.
Well done. And I want to congratulate you for your story for starters. And this is what the One Shot Movement podcast is about: people that are actually out there making the most of their one shot. And from what you've just described, you're a perfect guest for this show and audience.
Thank you.
I want to take the first question in regards to if you can even provide, a bit of a snapshot of history from when we were, I guess, the Commonwealth Constitution was introduced to, how that all happened and where we are now, because I want to sort of move into referendums and the voice in particular and hone into that. So for somebody that doesn't understand how all that happened, it would be good if you can share some insights to that.
Well, our constitution came out of the 1890s, the movement of uniting the 6 colonies in Australia, which were Tasmania, New South Wales, Queensland, South Australia, Victoria, and Western Australia. And the idea being that we wanted to form ourselves into an independent nation. So that was the movement. They worked on the constitution, and it was finally approved in the 1899, and then it went to a referendum and was approved by the Australian public at that stage. And then, of course, in 1901, we were, on the 1st of January 1901, we become the Commonwealth of Australia, not 6 separate colonies. From that, it was in fear of, a lot of the stuff was also in fear about Chinese and other races coming to Australia. So in a sense, it set up the white Australian policy, which was created by the Labor Party, the Labor movement, because they were scared that the Chinese and other groups of people would come to Australia and work harder than us and take over. So that's where that come from. But as a nation, we've grown a lot since those days. And so, for instance, some of the myths that go around about Aboriginals never had citizenship or had voting rights prior to 1967 is false. In New South Wales, Victoria, Tasmania, and South Australia, Aboriginals have always had the vote, because when they, in the 1850s, when elections were set up and legislative assemblies and legislative councils were set up in each of the colonies in those days, which are now the states, it said you just had to be a British subject and over 21 and a male, of course. And except for South Australia, they also had females were allowed. In fact, it was one of the first places in the world that allowed females to vote. And so, seeing that Aboriginal people were British subjects, so in New South Wales, for instance, I have records of my grandparents voting as far back as 1913, and then there's records of Aboriginal women and that voting in the 1890s in South Australia. The other thing too was when Australian citizenship was formalised, which was in 1948, the same thing occurred. You had to be a British subject, born in Australia, etc. And of course, Aboriginals were. So we've always had Australian citizenship. The difference was in a lot of Australia, because of the segregation laws that existed at the time, the Aboriginal Protection Act and the Aborigines Welfare Act, Aboriginals were treated as second-class citizens. One of the things of the history is that after the Second World War, a lot of Aboriginals served in that war. It was interesting that when they come back to Australia, white Australians and non-Indigenous Australians just wanted to have a beer with their mates that they served in Papua New Guinea and across North Africa and in Greece and were in Cheng military prison camps and the Burma railway and Thai railway lines. And they found out that they couldn't do that with their Aboriginal colleagues. So that's where the Fakatsi movement started, which was about, it was mainly military people, ex-military people who served in the Second World War, who fought for full citizenship rights for Aboriginals. And it's one of those little things of history that people don't talk about. I suppose it doesn't fit some of the narrative of some of our other some people who are a bit more radical than me. And then finally, in 1962, the federal government under the Menzies government gave us all voting rights. So, and then that made West Australia and Queensland also give voting rights. So because of the Menzies government, we all got voting rights in 1962. And we also in the 67 referendum, which was about equality and getting racism out of the racial clauses out of the Constitution, that it was successful. Over 90% of Australians supported that. And it was about desegregating Australia and everyone being equal as citizens of Australia. And within 4 or 5 years, all the state discriminatory laws disappeared. In fact, by the 1970s, there was no discriminatory laws in Australia. And then we started progressing from there, where Aboriginals got into university, was able to finish school, get jobs, run businesses, and so on. And we're on this journey to make this country a more united country as we all have equal citizenship.
Yeah, and I guess one of my questions, living through the last 3 years of, the COVID era, let's say, what we've seen and witnessed and experienced was a conversation, I would call it a conversation around the Constitution and the Commonwealth Constitution and the Crown, because there was this tug of war between state and federal power where we felt like we were stripped of our human rights in lots of ways. A lot of people,
Yes.
And there was this constant conversation that the Constitution is an elegant document that protects the people of Australia, and the states seem to have all the power. And we saw all sorts of crazy decisions being made, and it felt like we were nearly Europe, where every state had its own sort of set of rules. Do you understand how all that come about? And if so, can you?
Well, that's because Australia is a federation. Like the United States, there's a federal government and then there's state governments, and each state government is sovereign to itself. Well, the same thing in Australia. A lot of people don't realise that we're a federation. States have powers. In fact, they have a lot of powers. In fact, they run education, they run health systems, they run infrastructure development, and so on. And the federal government, the only thing the federal government's got is like defence and all that type of things, but also they have a big say because they have monetary powers over the states. What we saw in the bigger of a shock to everyone was how powerful the states really were. That they could close down the borders, they could enforce people, enforce laws contrary to, as you said, the human rights of people, their life, liberty, and freedoms. And that was a big thing that shocked us all for that. It didn't shock me so much because I've been involved with governments at all levels. And I can say that that they are very powerful, the states, under our federation and that. So you've seen all these, what I saw was a great threat to our freedoms, our liberties, our way of what life as a liberal democracy, really. And they sort of cut off our freedom of speech. They cut off a whole wide range of things that happened during that period. Look, now we've come out of COVID, and gee, it feels like it's like 100 years ago now, but we're still feeling that the residual of those powers of those states and territories. This is why, as a nation, you've got the states are in charge of certain areas, and the Commonwealth, or the federal government, as you like to call it, are in charge of other areas.
Okay. I want to move on to the voice, because this is the big topic, the most important topic of the year, and could really shape our future. And like, if you are somebody that isn't interested in looking outside of the narrative, let's call it the mainstream, listening to Prime Minister Albanese speak on a daily basis about the importance of it, you turn the TV on and the news are saying, we're excited to bring everyone together and give everyone a voice. But there are a strong portion of people in the Indigenous community that think that this is actually segregating and creating more segregation. Do you want to explain what the actual voice is all about?
Well, I'll start talking about the segregation. So, like I said a few moments ago, 1967, we wanted to end that segregation. We wanted to come united as a nation. And you look at all the Aboriginal leadership of that period, they actually said, we want to be treated equal, just like everyone else. We don't want to be lording over people. We want to be equal to our brothers and sisters and that who come as migrants to this country or had been here previously during the colonial period. We all want to be together as a liberal democracy and enjoy the full opportunities that citizenship gives you. And that's exactly what happened. What we're seeing now is us going back to the prior to 1967 of those segregation again. You're looking at putting race back into the Constitution. Aboriginals will have this voice into the government and to Parliament and to the executive. They will have a second bite of the cherry, which most Australians will only have one. And you're at a time that you are seeing the best progression of all in regard to that. Now there's Aboriginals in parliaments across Australia, as well as in the federal parliament. You're seeing ministers in governments and shadow ministers in opposition across Australia now. So where we're starting to get to the right area of public debates and everything about how we move forward as a country, as a united country. This has caused huge divisions, not only within the Aboriginal community, arguments and fights, but you look across the wider Australian community and about how this has really divided us again, after 50 or 60 years of us moving forward as a nation, and we're getting people who have just come from overseas post Second World War, migrants and refugees who have helped work hard with us, Australians who were prior, born here and everything, and built this amazing economy, built this amazing nation, and now they're going to be, they're going to be treated as second-class citizens, and I just find this bizarre that a liberal democracy where you've got freedoms, you've got human rights, you've got liberties that and like free speech and so on, are but now starting to get trashed. And this is one of the big problems I have with The Voice. And we're going to have, I'll give an example. In one of the best policies ever created by a government, I was working with Nigel Scullion, who's the Minister for Indigenous Australians, and with Malcolm Turnbull at the time, but prior to that was Tony Abbott. And we come up with this, we said the only people, when we look at the world, the only way to get people out of poverty is to get them a job, to build businesses that are able to create those jobs. They're commercial, private-owned, profit-making businesses who are able to hire people and get them jobs. And from that, you need to have kids going to school, getting educated and getting skilled, so you have a skilled, educated workforce to work with. Now, in the 1st of July 2015, there was the Indigenous business economy was about $6.2 million. Today, 8 years later, because of the policy we set up of encouraging and working with setting up businesses that we are able to employ people and train people, it is now worth $8.7 billion. 45,000 jobs have been created through that process, and it has had an amazing outcome for Aboriginal people in regard to working in the mainstream and getting into businesses and that, and working with their fellow Australians, create the great economy we have now. Now, when you look at that, and then you look at The Voice is really just a bureaucracy, a large bureaucracy. It's supposed to be, and this is their words, not mine, it's supposed to be an advisory group. Since 1973, we have had Indigenous or Aboriginal advisory groups advising government. In fact, we've got one called the Coalition of the Peaks, and that sits at the table, the cabinet sits at the table with the national cabinet talking about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander issues. Now that's happening, and it's been happening since 1973. So these people want to set it up again, and they're saying that they need to do that because Aboriginals don't have a voice. It's just a load of rubbish. There's over 3,000 advisory committees, associations, councils, whatever you want to call them, Indigenous and Aboriginal, who are advising government today. So where is this thing about them not having a voice? It's just bizarre. And then you look at how they got it set up. They got a local councils, they got regional councils, they got a federal council, and that. To me, that's a huge bureaucracy that's going to cost hundreds of millions of dollars to operate. So why are we spending that money when we should be spending the money on needs, on people who have fallen on hard times and need help to get back to work, or need help because of other reasons and that? Why aren't we spending that hundreds of millions of dollars there at that grassroots lower level for all Australians, rather than just spending it all in the capital, all on a bunch of people sitting around the table talking?
Yeah, and look, I mean, the devil is in the detail with some of these documents and things, and there's been a lot of people outspoken to say that we just want to know exactly all the devil in the detail, and Mr. Albanese is saying it's only a minor change. What's the big problem? And you listen to a senator like Senator Jacinta Price, and she said minor change, and then lists like 4 or 5 major changes that are, are going to really transform our future. Do you want to talk about the devil in the detail here?
Well, the devil in the detail is right. And these are not my words. These are the words of the legal counsel that's advising the design committee, which is going to design what the voice looks at. And I always, when I'm buying a car, I like to kick the tires and get in and give it a bit of a run and make sure everything's operating and everything like that before I buy that car. They're saying to us, trust us. Just trust us. You vote for it, and then afterwards we'll design it. And it's sort of like, trust us, give me the money for the car and it'll turn up one day. Give me a break. And then their legal advisors are saying, well, this could be one of the most flawed processes that we've ever had. We could be sitting in high court challenges and arguments forever, and it will interfere with our democracy, the way we are operating. We have grown as one of the longest democracies in the world, still operating. We have people get on boats and risk their lives to come to Australia because they see the prosperity of Australia. They see the liberties that they don't have at home, free speech and all that type of stuff. You're able to start your own business and do things and make a good life for yourself, education and so on. You don't see people, leaving Australia if we're so bad. The only people I see leaving on a boat from Australia are people on P&O cruises going on a holiday. These people are fighting to come here and enjoy the prosperity that we have. I just, so why are we putting that under threat? Why are we putting one group above everyone else? We are a society that everyone, every human being, every citizen of this country are equal under our laws. Everyone had the opportunities to be, and there's millions of opportunities out there in Australia for people to improve their lives and their children's lives and their grandchildren's lives. And there's so much opportunities to get educated and get to university or do a trade, which I encourage a lot more people to do because they seem to be more sensible than some of the university graduates I've seen. And get out there and make this country great. Look after your families, look after yourselves, and and this is the thing that concerns me massively, that we're going to end up, like going back to the old mission days when we had mission managers who are bureaucrats who controlled our lives for Aboriginal people. We don't want to go back to those days. We want us to be like every other Australian. We are Australians. We want that great the great opportunities that this country offers, so we can get into it and do some great things. And you've seen the evidence of it. When I was a kid, the idea of going to university, we didn't even know what a university is. Now we've got hundreds of doctors, we've got hundreds of lawyers, we've got hundreds of, we've got accountants, we've got engineers, we've got a whole wide range of people working at banks, people working everywhere. And now this is all going to become under threat because of this body that Albanese wants to push.
And just, I'm not sure where and who come up with the big idea for going into this direction, but there's been figures. You mentioned that this could be a high court issue for years to come, and all unravel and unwind and never get solved, and threat to democracy. And there's been people saying that this process alone is a $350 million investment, and we already have the voice bodies. I think Senator Gerard Rennick referenced, I think NAII, or there's a big
That's right, NIAA, yeah.
Yeah, and so there's already $4 billion poured into that, and they are essentially a voice. Who came up with the idea of let's have a voice, let's have a referendum? We have had a couple of referendums in the past that didn't really go anywhere. Is this a Labor big idea, or is there an Indigenous community saying we want more of a voice?
No, it's not the Indigenous community. There's a whole heap of elite people. When you look at them, they're all they're academics. They're working in organisation that depends on government funding. And they're just living off the tit of government, quite frankly. And these are the people who are suddenly woken up, and they're realising that through the programs we set up about having Aboriginals set up their own businesses and go into partnership with other Australians and run businesses and make money and hire people and get their kids to school and get their kids into trades and university, and that they're starting to feel that they're going to be left behind because all these people, because of all the Aboriginals all get prosperous, economically prosperous in that. Well, we don't need any of these things anymore. We don't need these special agencies. We don't need anything anymore because we're doing fine. We're like every other Australian. We're doing great because we got these. We're able to run our own businesses. We're able to get employed and get jobs and get the university and get trades and get skilled in educations and that. And once that happens, that's when the bureaucracy start to get fearful because they start to look like they're going to be redundant. And this is what this is all about. It's about them trying to keep their own job and keep Aboriginal, keep the misery of Aboriginal people there, because if they didn't have a misery industry, then there'd be no jobs for them.
And what we saw and witnessed and experienced over the last 3 years during I call it the COVID era, we saw a narrative being pushed, and then it unfolded into institutions like the AFL that would say, we support everybody, that whatever the government's saying. Then you see sports stars and other influencers are out there saying, go and roll up your sleeve and do all of these things, which, there seems to be that sort of push with this agenda as well. Like last week, the AFL are starting to make some announcements about that. There's a number of Indigenous influencers that are saying, we've got to support the voice, we've got to do this. But it's, not, you would think if it was such a good thing, every Indigenous person would be right behind it. But people like yourself and Jacinta Price and that are saying, no, this is the wrong direction to go.
Well,
an agenda?
Well, even some of the football players, they have Cheryl Mitchell and Cody Walker in the National Rugby League. They were asked, this is two of the biggest stars in the game. They asked them about the voice, and they said, we're not going to vote for anything until we know what it is. And no one knows what it is, quite frankly. And is it going to actually make improvement in people's life? Look, Australian taxpayers, Australian people are very generous. If someone's fallen on hard times, no matter what they are, then we are happy to help them and then get them back to work and get them back into a good position in life. And this thing is just an annual, to spend money. And you're right about the $380 million it is actually, because that's in the budget papers that says that will be spent on this on this exercise. Surely we can, our hospitals and our medical services and our schools and everything like that need that sort of $300 million injection rather than being wasted on bureaucrats. This is getting crazy. Look, you look at the polling, when you talk about recognising Aboriginal and reconciliation, us all coming together as a united country, 90% of people, over 90% of people say, yes, let's be a united country. Let's all get together and work together. Then you talk about the voice and it drops. It's down to 50%, nearly 50% now. And in some states, it's down to 47% because people are waking up. They're saying this is not going to make a practical change to people's lives. This is all about all these bureaucrats and all these people sitting in Canberra who are spending our tax dollars, I always say, I'm starting to become a bit of a Kerry Packer in this area. I like to keep my money because, when I look at the governments, they're not spending it very well, So, I like, I just cannot. And when you talk to them, you talk to the AFL and you talk to the National Rugby League or you talk to some of these sporting stars and that, and you say, please explain to me what the voice is and how it is going to have a practical outcome for Aboriginal people. They can't explain it. They can't. Oh, it's all nice. We all want to be nice. We all want it'd be a nice thing to do. And if you don't do it, you're a racist. As soon as people start, like the old Margaret Thatcher line, if someone starts abusing you and calling you names and that, then it's obviously they don't have an argument at all. They're just trying to bully you.
Yeah, well said. And I did interview a famous NBA basketballer Andrew Bogut that's quite outspoken about a number of different agendas. And he says,
Yeah, I've seen Andrew.
he always says, like, keep sport out of the agendas. I want to watch sport. I want to play sport to be, for the theatre of sport, not to be influencing decisions and being paid for to influence decisions. And I think that's a really good line. Institutions need to go and stay in their own lane.
And also, you look at sport, you couldn't get a more level playing field in sport. You look at the NBL, you look at rugby league, you look at AFL, you look at all the soccer codes. You see all these incredible people of different races, background, but all coming together as Australians and playing and getting paid very well for it. That is the perfect leveler. There's no, you're going to get extra money because you're an Aboriginal, or you're going to get extra money because you're a white person. No, you're going to get extra money because you're the best player. You're the one who's going to get out there and have a go. You could not get. So I just find it bizarre that these sports administrators then come out and trying to make the rest of the society as unequal and unleveled playing field as possible. I just find this totally bizarre. Who made the AFL and the rugby? The other thing too, if you are going to make a comment, I'm a great believer, and I welcome the Yes campaign to come and talk to people, and I welcome that we are allowed to come and talk about the No campaign. Has the AFL actually had people in the room that are part of the No campaign? Has the NRL had people in the room that is a part of the No campaign? And if the answer is no, all they are is propagandists. That's all they are. They're pushing a political propaganda line because they have not listened and never gave the opportunity for both sides to present their case.
Well said. I think there's an argument out there, and you follow somebody like Senator Gerard Rennick or Senator Alex Antic, and they've been quite outspoken about a number of genders, whether it's gender in general or climate or the COVID era. Some of the things that they've been talking about of late around the World Health Organization treaty and the impact that could potentially have over Australia. Effectively, by the way they describe it, it's like if they want to call a pandemic, we all have to comply with this organization's rules. Is there a treaty or something in the voice that could be quite concerning in the decision making?
Well, when we go back to the Uluru statement from the heart, which is the basis for the voice, there are two things that really scare me, and I'll be quite honest about that. One is the two of them you've mentioned now. One is the one that really scares me is the truth telling. Who is going to become the arbiter of truth? In a free, a liberal democracy, we believe in free speech. Whether you agree with a person or not, they have those rights to have that free speech and put their case out there and prosecute their case. Every Australian has that right to do that. So what we're going to have as some commissar of an arbitrator of truth who's going to be telling us what is truth and what is not truth. And if you are telling the not truths, whatever they are, then you're going to lose liberty. Are you going to lose your job? Are you going to lose your income for your family or what? To me, this is another extension of you go back to the old fascist and communist dictatorship where they have their minister for propaganda. Who was the arbiter of truth? The only way you can work out what truth is you get people to put out their arguments and have a discussion and have a debate, and then they come to a conclusion. This idea that you have to go through some truth-telling process to some commissar an arbitrator of truth is a real serious issue for me, and that's the biggest probably challenge to our democracy in this whole argument. And of course, then when you're doing treaty processes and that, you look. This is the thing that makes worrying Aboriginal people who are out there in the bush and remote areas. At the moment, through native title and land rights, when, like I said, I'm a chairman of a board of mining, I cannot do anything on my mine sites without having to consult, negotiate, and come to an agreement. So what's going to happen through this whole process? You know, so I do that in the Aboriginal community there. The traditional owners love it, and they all agree with it. Does that mean someone can lobby the voice in Canberra and say to the Minister for Resources and Energy and Mining, hey, don't sign off on this agreement? So where's the democratic voice, the self-determination of those Aboriginal people who want that project to go ahead, and that could be lobbied and stopped in Canberra? These are the things that start to worry me about this whole process. And that's where you start to worry about, you know, what does this treaty mean? What does this other stuff mean?
Yeah, I saw a great quote out there the other day, you know, because nobody actually knows the full devil in the details. So somebody put out there, if you don't understand it, vote no. If you do understand it, you will vote no. If you
That's true.
Yeah, if you were to ask 3 or 4 important questions to understand the devil in the detail, what would some of those questions be?
Yeah. Well, the first thing, please explain to me what truth talking is, or truth telling. You know, who's going to decide what is truth? I want to know that. How does this is this voice? How far does the power of this voice stretch? And if you listen to the proponents of it, they say that it's everything under the Constitution. They will have a say on that. And of course they have that now because every citizen in Australia has a say on what happens in that Constitution and what happens in legislation, because it affects all of us. So you're going to have a group of people who will have power over the top of that. You know, how far does this power extend? And then, of course, how will does this mean that we'll be forever going to the High Court arguing these cases about, you know, is it going to stifle the operations of government? Is it going to stifle the operations of our federation? So, you know, these are simple questions we should ask. And, you know, I have not heard anyone who can answer that question. Usually they sit there and go, oh, no, it's you don't have to worry. You don't have to worry. You know, if someone tells me not to worry, then I'm starting to worry.
Absolutely. Yeah, and there is, I believe, I think around 11% of senators or ministers at the moment may be from Indigenous background or something already in Parliament. And I know that there was a number of ministers that were really disappointed that the government established a national cabinet that overrode nearly every decision making, become this secret body that nobody can get information out of what was discussed in these national cabinet, and they just did that. Are they going to be able to do that and override the Constitution? Because my understanding is if we voted yes, pretty much they can override the protection of the Constitution. Is that a possibility?
Well, the possibility is through the mechanics. Okay, so when you have a national cabinet, and you have all this state territory, and also the Coalition of the Peaks, this Aboriginal organisation, the voice sitting there, making decisions about education, making decisions about infrastructure, about taxation, about education, about a whole wide range of laws and that in this country, then you got to start wondering what's going to happen. What's going to happen to our freedoms? We're built we built a society in the last 50 years or more that has become a society of uniting us together. That we have, as citizens of this country, we have basic liberties, we have freedoms. And our ancestors on all sides have fought wars over this. They went to the Second World War to fight against Nazism and that. They fought in Vietnam. They fought in North Korea and Korea. They fought in the First World War, laid their lives down for our freedoms. And are we going to give those freedoms away on the whim of because it's a nice thing to do? And if you don't do it, you're a racist. Give me a break.
Yeah, and just I guess wrapping up, if you were to send people to any documents or information, or I noticed that you on LinkedIn certainly post a fair bit about this topic, and I Jacinta Price does as well. Professor Augusto Zimmerman, who's a Constitution guy, does post a lot as well. Is there anywhere you would recommend people if they want to actually understand a bit more about this, even though we don't know much? But
let's go to the website of Fair Australia and look at some of the documents and some of the writings that we have done. I've kicked off today a series of writings I'm going to put out every day in regard to the constitutional issues. There are other great people too. There's a book that we put out, Beyond, which is a whole wide range of academics and constitutional lawyers and so on, putting out, and I've got an article in it as well, pointing out the dangers of this voice and getting educated about it. And then, of course, you listen to like Augusto Zimmerman and other people who are out there, Ian Cullinan, the former High Court Justice, and all these other people. Listen to what they've got to say, and then make up your mind. The other thing, most important thing I say to all the players and administrators of all the fans and of all the sporting bodies, and also all the employees of companies who are putting up their hand to support the voice. You know what? They can't follow you into the polling booth. It's a secret ballot. You can vote any way you like to vote, and it's okay to vote no.
Well said. And as I said earlier, if you don't understand it, and this is what's really important, you need to understand if you're going to be voting for a radical change to our future, vote no. And if you do understand it, and you do take the time to listen to interviews like this or follow what Mr. Mundine's doing, you will vote no anyway. So on that note, I want to thank you for your time, and feel free to say anything else before we wrap up.
I also, listen to what they're saying on the other side. And they're saying, their own side is actually saying we're going to have power to do everything. We're from gambling to education to high court. They're going, and the Reserve Bank and everything. They're not our words. That's their words. So listen to some of their words, and you'll start. You'll definitely be saying no.
And from me, I want to thank you for taking the time, Mr. Mundine.
Thank you very much.